Introducing AirPro Diagnostics' revolutionary calibration technology, Augie. AirPro Diagnostics' latest innovation is a game changer in forward-facing camera ADAS calibrations. Augie is a wireless compact device that allows you to calibrate vehicles anywhere. AirPro has created a theater-like environment to digitize and miniaturize static ADAS targets and present them to the forward-facing camera exactly as required by vehicle manufacturers. Find out how required calibrations can be simplified. Order your Augie today.
Welcome to Shatterproof, the Autoglass Journey for Independence podcast. This week's episode, Snow Globe or Crystal Ball, What Lies Ahead for ADAS Calibration, with guest host Josh McFarlin, President and COO of AirPro Diagnostics. If you haven't already liked our podcast, click on the subscribe button below, and also take a moment to like this episode so anytime we update the content, you will be the first to get access to all this great media and industry information. With that, let's get into part one of this two-part show with your host, Gary Hart, and guest host Josh McFarlin, live from the Collision Industry Conference winter meeting in Palm Springs, California.
Hey everybody, it is Gary with the Independent Glass Association, and welcome to Shatterproof, the Autoglass podcast. Today, we are grateful to be here, first of all, in beautiful Palm Springs, California, at the Collision Industry Conference, CIC. So several times a year, the collision industry and this organization gets together in various places to discuss mostly education. Josh? Yeah.
Absolutely.
And before I start just addressing you as Josh,
sure.
Let's talk about Josh. He is our guest host today. Josh is the COO and President of AirPro Diagnostics. And for those of you that, but depending on which side of where you started with, you may have started with the AirPro Diagnostics tool, which is a remote recalibration tool.
Absolutely, remote diagnostics, remote calibrations, absolutely.
And then the Augie, which is the on-the-glass solution for targeting and recalibration that goes along with the rest of what AirPro has, correct?
Absolutely, all about the forward-facing camera.
Good stuff, right? Yeah. So with that being said, so Josh, I know AirPro is one of the sponsors of CIC, so you guys come together annually with most of the shows, as you do like with SEMA and some others as well.
That's right.
And you're also an industry partner of the Independent Glass Association. So I just want to point out before we really roll into things, a lot of people out there may go, well, wait a minute, we just saw some sponsorship mention here as the podcast rolled, and we see that AirPro is an industry partner. So this is today is not a paid podcast. We're not here to, we are going to mention all the tools, including AirPro.
But I'm getting paid, correct?
Yeah, you are absolutely going to get paid. Yeah.
All right.
Quick, get some McDonald's gift certificates and some Starbucks cards. And I think there's a Hilton gift shop.
Perfect.
Yeah, because you want to get the little.
Well, I got
flamingo.
the water, so yeah, I'm all right. I'm good. We're square.
Well, we get, if you want a night out of the town, there's not a lot to do after 7 p.m.
No, it closes down early here in Palm Springs.
Well, even on the drive here this morning, it was gray hair. You were like, is that an autonomous car? They're testing here? And you get up and like, oh, no, it's not.
They just forgot the phone book.
But we digress. So we really are here to talk about today is there's a lot of disinformation in the industry that seems to stem mostly from two things, in my opinion. Maybe it's different with you, is social media is the worst.
Absolutely.
And then there are truly, I believe it's salespeople for various tool companies, and it doesn't matter what the tool is. It could be recalibration, it could be for removing a windshield, but one person will spread BS.
Absolutely.
And the next thing you know, it becomes truth because apparently social media is the de facto.
Yeah, I just want to be careful walking this thin line, right? Because some might claim I'm a salesperson for AirPro, and now I'm about to spread BS. So
yeah, but I think what people look at is once you reach the executive level, you've already created so much hype behind it that you're just on easy street.
That's right.
You've made
it's all
it,
just
so
coasting now. All coasting.
But I think if we had Brian here or somebody in your sales organization, it would be a much different thing. And,
sure.
And I totally understand what sales organizations need to do. They need to sell.
This is true.
But I'd like to just jump right in on like a big point in the industry talks about remote recalibration.
Okay.
And I know the last in Virginia Beach at the AGSC calibration committee,
Right.
this is one of the topics that came up
Okay.
amongst others. And so from your company's perspective first, and then also throw in your own opinion,
Sure.
is remote calibration possible?
Absolutely possible. And let's talk about why it's important. Okay. So you have how many makes and models in the car park today that require some form of forward-facing camera calibration, right?
Lots.
So lots, right? It's a big number. And so whether you're using one diagnostic tool platform, something aftermarket that covers multiple makes and models, or you're using the different OEM tools, right, or a combination therein, you have a lot of procedures, processes, and kind of workflows that you need to master if you're going to work on all makes, all models. And so in order to achieve that, you've got to have a really wide breadth of deep knowledge, okay? And I don't view that as a practical expectation that you can stay current on and be the master every single time. And so when you're working with a partner like AirPro, and we're doing remote diagnostics and remote calibrations, we are using multiple different software platforms, right? An aftermarket platform as well as OEM platforms. And when you make a request for a calibration on a Nissan Rogue, that's going to the Nissan team. And you're getting a technician involved that has has Nissan brand experience, hands-on in many cases, right? Years at a dealership and things like that. And they are a brand specialist on that brand. So you're not getting the Ford guy, right, that says, oh, I'm going to take that Nissan and provide assistance. You're getting somebody from the Nissan team. When you submit a Toyota, you get somebody from the Toyota team. Now, do we have technicians that work on more than one brand? Absolutely. Do we have technicians that work on all? None. We have 0 technicians. And it's not because I don't think we have anybody that possibly could. It's because we want them to be specialized.
Sure.
We want them to be focused on a brand and live in that service information day in and day out, and live in that diagnostic platform day in and day out, so that when they're going through that process and there's something that they need to debug, they're in the best possible position to do so.
Oh, absolutely. And so if I'm a technician and I'm out at Dean Martin Boulevard right now, I have my Toyota Camry out there, and with any tool, I'm going to set up my targeting, going to prep, go through the checklist, and now the advantage of a remote assistance solution such as yours is that specialized technician obviously is going to be there as a guide to say, yeah, this is what will help the controlled environment better if you did this, if you do this.
Absolutely.
And you have that. Whereas if I'm just a standalone tool guy, I will have to have honed in my skills to understand, oh yeah, here's how I have the car parked like this. Let me recheck measurement, let me do these things.
Right.
So the advantage obviously is, remote recalibration is absolutely possible, 100%.
100%.
But secondary to it is, you have to consistently perform recalibrations to hone your skills with any tool. So it's not going to matter what it is. And I just also want to make sure that I'm correct in saying that even with the AirPro solutions, you don't always have to lean in on somebody remotely. You could just connect, go, and it's done, and everybody's happy.
Absolutely.
And that's probably a majority of the time that occurs.
Absolutely.
But as we've both seen, you're members of some of these forums, I think it's every day, 3, maybe 4 people. I got a 22 Cherokee. Anybody ever seen this drone? They take a picture of the tablet and the error message. So in my opinion, that means they're out somewhere or they're in their shop. They just took 20 minutes to post this on 3 groups in social media, which means, the efficacy of just what they did is off.
Right.
Now, is that, where does that lie? Is that the tool that's the fault, or is this the user that it's a fault? Is it a combination? What's your opinion on that?
It's a combination. In general, it's a combination, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that technician that made that post doesn't know what he or she is doing. In fairness, they're reaching out for help. But why are they reaching out for help? It may be that they haven't, I mean, obviously they've not run into that scenario before, or they wouldn't be asking, right? And now you have to ask so many questions. Well, what version of the software are you using? Is it up to date? Did you find any faults ahead of time? Were there any problems with the system? Did you have any complications while you were going through the glass replacement and getting the camera back in place? Did you verify the camera placement and the bracket placement? These are all questions that our technicians run through over and over again. And just to be clear, while we have AirPro as a diagnostic platform that's remote and Augie, you don't have to be using Augie in order to use us for remote calibrations. We do calibrations every day for people that have a different target system, whatever that might be. It might be an OEM target and their procedure. It might be one of our competitors' target systems that's a consolidated kit and their process. And we will walk them through whatever that is to verify placement, to verify setup, and to verify that the vehicle is calibration ready.
And then, so you talk about, so like a car cal setup or something.
Sure.
So how does your service, a target's a target? Should be.
Should be.
Yeah, and so do you find that a lot of the issues that you may have are target based with your solution? You're like, oh, no matter what you do, you can't get one of these, or does it work all the time?
The answer is kind of yes again. So there are, I'd say if it's Subaru related, and there's a couple of other examples where if we're running into an issue there, we start asking more questions about what target you're using and how you've got it set up. Other vehicle platforms, we don't see that as much. But I know I'm preaching to the choir when I explain the, plus or minus 3 degrees, right? There's only a handful of vehicles that provide return values at the completion of a calibration, okay? When in those vehicles, we get a range, an allowable range of plus or minus 3 degrees that you can get for those return values of yaw, pitch, and roll. Okay, you get that in the software platform at the completion of the calibration. And those values are indicative of the relationship between the camera, at the purest form of the camera and the target. The relationship between the camera and the target, forward-facing camera. So, but what does that really mean when you're doing a conventional full-size calibration with a full-size target? It's really indicative of everything in between too, right? The floor, the tire pressure, the ride height, the position of the camera on the windshield, the position of the windshield in the car, the position of the target, the condition of the target, the height of the target, like all of those are factors. The lighting conditions, the floor and wall colors all have an influence on yaw, pitch, and roll and how that's interpreted by the software to determine the relationship between the camera and the full-size target, or the target in general. When we do an Augie calibration, those values are just as relevant, but there's a lot less variables that are being taken into account because a lot of them are eliminated from the process, and we can get more into that in a minute.
Sure.
But that's plus or minus 3 degrees. Let's just talk about that for a moment. There are vehicles out there with a 7-meter target distance, okay, when you're doing a full-size calibration, okay? 3 degrees off the camera at 7 meters has like a 13.5 inch, right? Just to put it in a measurement that we can all visualize easily, it's got a 13.5 inch plus or minus swing.
Okay.
In yaw, pitch, or roll, right? So let's round that. Let's take the total distance, right? So now you got 27 inches, right, of range.
Leeway.
Yeah. Okay, that you can be off, and the system is still going to accept it.
So now I already hear, like it just came over me. I just was tackled in a dark alley somewhere by some of these people on social media going,
Right.
But see, that's not acceptable. But this is
I agree.
Right now, but this is the OEM's leeway. This isn't something that you created or
No.
Autel or somebody.
Nor am I saying it's good. Just to be clear.
Okay.
I'm not saying that, we got 27 inches we can live within.
Yes, I mean, that's great.
I want to be at 0, 0, 0.
Yeah.
Okay, just to be clear.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason that they do that, right, is it's going to be affected by these other things, right? You've replaced the glass, you've got a new bracket, the camera maybe or you've replaced the camera, and that camera sees things a little differently. It's the whole point of the calibration. You're teaching the vehicle how to interpret its surroundings through the camera. The position of that camera, the condition of that camera are really important in that. But you've got to have leeway. The OEM is trusting that you, Gary, when you measured the distance out from the leading edge of the front bumper or from the center line of the front axle, and you set it up at the height, and you stored that target correctly, right? You don't have twist in it or whatever, right? Because I'm sure we're all doing a really good job of storing our targets exactly right,
Oh, no.
right?
No,
so that we
absolutely
don't
not.
have a target board that's got twist or roll built into it because of how we're storing it, right? That all of those things are perfect, and that you've put it where you're supposed to. And that's going to yield the best values. Now, they may not actually be 0, 0, 0, because again, something about the vehicle condition will influence that, okay? But it'll be the best case scenario. That's the ideal scenario. So they're trusting that you did your part right, and they have no control over that. That's why you see the folks that maybe don't know what they're doing when they get a failed calibration. That means you've exceeded, as an example, one of those ranges of plus or minus 3 degrees, or in that one example of a 7-meter setup, you've exceeded 27 inches potentially of range, leeway, right? So 13 and a half in either distance, right? You've exceeded those limits, and that's what's caused the fail. In that scenario, though, what do most people do? They walk over and they jostle the target a little bit one way or the other, and they say, all right, let me try it again. Oh, it went through. So now what have you done? You've got it to just within the 3 degree limit.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, most of the OEMs don't provide a return value. There's only a handful that do. So you don't know that. You just see on the screen that it was successful.
Sure.
Well, then I did it.
You
it's
did.
right.
Good job.
Now, if I go road
Let's
test
get paid.
Right. If I go road test the vehicle, and the vehicle has lane keep assist or lane departure warning, and I was off in roll or yaw, then I may be able to pick that up in road testing the vehicle. If I was off in pitch, I'm probably not going to pick it up unless I decide to go test it for auto emergency braking, and I do not advise that. Like, that's not a good plan.
That would be one hell of a garage keeper's insurance policy.
Exactly right.
I mean, yeah.
Exactly right.
Or we just start selling inflatable car targets.
Yeah.
Like some of these testing shows have done in
Right.
the last 5 years. We're like,
Absolutely.
Inflatable Mercedes. Watch this, and the Tesla blew right through it again. And
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay.
And
yeah.
they're remarkably expensive too, those
Are they?
inflatable targets.
I figure you just pick them up at like Party City or something. or
They're made
Amazon.
out of different
Alibaba.
materials to pick up on radar and to be seen by the camera under the right conditions, and yeah.
Because it has to have a certain reflective material.
Exactly right.
I mean, otherwise the camera goes, you can't fool me.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a Mylar balloon. Gotcha.
Yeah. I'm running right through it.
So in this leeway, and I mean, so we talk about, and I'll just throw the controlled environment out here because that's the next one is controlled environment has a meaning to everybody in the industry. People seem to accept that controlled environment means this pristine, white, flat, certain Kelvin of lighting and this perfect concrete slab that has no pitch to it at all.
Right.
Everybody's happy.
Don't drain.
It's great. Now, you take the person who's out on this cul-de-sac out here, for instance, and this is a mountain, so everything's going down to the valley. So we already know that the pitch is this.
Right.
And then apparently they've used eminent domain here they just went ahead and got the first 5 feet of each side. So these roads are extremely large, but then they
Sure.
tilt into the drainage system.
Right.
So you've got all of this inconsistency out there. Today, the sun's been coming and going.
Sure.
So now you've got this difference in lighting, and here I am, I'm set up, and I have this leeway of up to 27 inches.
Right.
And I get the pass, I take it on the test drive, I feel comfortable with it, but it's let's say it's 13 inches off, but the system passed me off.
Right.
I didn't see anything that startled me as the
Sure.
test driver.
Sure.
I give the car back to the customer saying, here's your pass report.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy. So that's the acceptable OEM. Now, is that the tool OEM, or is that just the software's algorithm that the tool, no matter whose tool it is, just says, this is what the OEM says we can do?
We've done a lot of testing with a lot of different softwares. And ultimately, I'll take it up a level for a second.
Okay.
So in general, when you're talking about diagnostics, which calibrations falls under that general heading, right? You're using diagnostic software to perform the calibration. You're not generally buying a separate calibration tool, okay? It's an operation within, or procedure within the diagnostic tool. The diagnostic tool, doesn't matter, insert brand name here, right? Including the OEMs, is a tool that sends a command for an operation to run. The operation technically resides on board the vehicle in the modules, okay? So the tool is just a keyboard.
It's an inquiry device.
Right.
Yeah.
So think about it in terms of a keyboard, right? It sends a command to present a K, and you turn around and you get a K back. Okay?
But 13 inches off.
Yeah, right. Possibly 13 inches off, right? Possibly in a different language, whatever. But think about the tool that way. The tool is sending a command. Now, it's a little more than that. It also has the ability to interpret or display the results that you get back from that command. But the actual operation, the diagnostic routine, lives on board the vehicle. It's in the vehicle, and all you're doing is you're using a tool or an interface in order to say, I want you to run this routine, whether that's scan all modules for all DTCs and clear all, right? Scan all, clear all, or it is the calibration routine, or it is a seat weight, occupant sensor calibration or check. Those routines live on the vehicle. The tool is just saying, I'm ready for you to do this. It's an interface to be able to do that. And I say all of that because there's a lot of misinformation about, I know, it's shocking. There's a lot of misinformation about the different tools. So now when you start to apply that for a moment into the ongoing debate, and I don't want to necessarily take us totally off on a rabbit trail here.
No, go right ahead.
But into the ongoing debate about aftermarket versus OE, it's a command. There's only one command that's going to work with the vehicle in order to get it to display DTCs. So does that start to dispel some of the assumptions and myths about, whether it's going to get all of them or not?
Right, and I think there's one other thing. So, and you of all people, I know enough to be dangerous, but also when you're interrogating these modules, the OEM has put that behind a firewall, and the pay-per-use license, let's say, or the license to access that is in the form of a key that they will entrust to the tool manufacturer to say, here's your license. So when we talk about annually, because there's a lot of people just now getting into it. And,
sure.
And I'm just going to throw some stats out there because some of you have already seen in this previous podcast that we had with David Leach of Don's Mobile with regards to the NAGS price and everything. This kind of came up in the sense that the average car on the road, 11 to 14 years, depending on your market. So we're going back pre-calibration requirement on a lot of vehicles that are in that road. Let's say 2017, David Leach says 2017 is kind of that sweet spot where a lot of recalibration started to happen from a vehicle standpoint. So now all of a sudden, you're seeing those go off the road. People are getting used cars, but now in that 2017 range from Carvana and all these places. And we're seeing 4 to 6% increases year after year as those older ones come up. So a lot of guys are just getting into this, and they hear, oh, well, if you go with this solution, you just pay once. And the reality is there is no pay once, because here's what's going to happen. One, you're going to have to pay for new licenses because the tool manufacturers either have new licenses or they're updating you on the new vehicles, which more of a license fee. Targets. To your point, guys out there going, oh, my target's bent, so I'm going to have to do this. So these targets, no matter whether they're fiberboard, whatever the construct of that is, they're going to go to hell because you're not always going to be taking care of them when you're mobile. Now, even in your shop, I've seen people just they'll toss it over in the corner.
Right.
And then they'll lean stuff up against it, and you see it bending.
Oh, yeah.
I walk into shops all the time and see that. And I'm like, we got that beautiful, Pelican case over there that they should be in.
Right.
Oh, it's too heavy. You have to take the lid off. But and so you got to buy
Slowing
those.
me down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to buy those.
Yep.
So there's this expense year after year. And so that is your interrogator, your device that you're using, no matter what it is, has to have that permission from whoever the authority is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
and let's talk about how they do that, right? Without going too terribly far down that path, right? You're either licensing that information, right? So you're an aftermarket tool platform. You're either licensing the information, or you're reverse engineering it. Okay. And there are good and bad examples of both. Okay. I'm not going to name any names, but there are good and bad examples of both. And if you're licensing it, you're effectively licensing it directly, from the OEM. There's an intermediary called the Equipment Tool Institute, ETI. They act as a clearinghouse for the code. Right to Repair Act and all of the complexity around that has that the OEMs are providing that data. I'm just going to generically call it data. I'm not a software guy. I'm not going to get into whether it's code or data or
we love it.
or what.
Wait a minute. Let me see. I was just looking for the hole back there.
Yeah, I'm plugged in.
Wow.
I'm plugged in.
But I love the duality of the haircuts.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Good job.
I could pass for twins.
Yeah.
By the way, did Lonnie tell you the running joke that I saw him in Phoenix?
No.
I went up behind him.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Went up behind him and said, I'm sorry, I'm gonna use
Oh, no, you're
Went
not.
up behind him and went, give me all your money. Oh, that's right, you work for AirPro.
Yeah.
I was waiting for you to actually.
Yeah.
That's so software as a service, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
This is a good point
Yeah.
as well. It's you're either going to pay annually, or you're going to pay as you go, or you're going to pay to some
Absolutely.
point. And that's actually a good point too, because there's so many models now in our life. People will have no problem in this industry having a Netflix account, a Hulu, then their Amazon Prime. So they're used to paying all these subscription models. You throw a disruptive tool out. And
Right.
I will say AirPro, because that's what AirPro is. It's a disruptive model, and that's good in my opinion. Disruptors are the best.
Right.
Because Elon Musk, I hate using his name, but he's a disruptor. There's all these things that are out there, and
his cash register rings every time you say it.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just paid a licensing fee, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Somewhere. But that's the thing is, like, I don't understand where these individuals get on their high horse to go, I shouldn't have to pay every time I do it. I'm like, well, that you have a choice, but B, why would you dump all over a model that for lots and lots and lots of individuals and shops work well, because it's the benefit that they have a knowledge base that they're paying for.
Sure.
So it's just like when you have a consult, you hire a CPA.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, there's another component to it, right? So let's just use AirPro as the example here. You're paying. It's a pay by the drink model. Every time you use our service, you're paying something for it. You know what we're doing every time we provide you with that service? Set aside the technicians and the overhead and those types of things. We're paying to license the software over and over and over again, right? There's a cost associated with that. And so then in Augie, right? Well, why do we have to pay to use the Augie? Why is it a pay by the drink model? We have to continually update the database with more models. You want it to work on all the cars you're working on? We have to be able to continue to go out and collect the data that we need on those vehicles in order to update that and make improvements to the tool, that when we update your tool, you're not paying any update fees for it.
Right.
Right? We're constantly providing updates to the tools and improving their coverage and their functionality and things like that.
So it's
and
an
there isn't a
investment
cost.
and again, like anything
Absolutely.
in business, small businesses, you're making investments constantly, whether it's in your people or
Right.
your infrastructure. That is the whole basis of
Right.
that. But back to the unlocking of the software and the institute that
Right.
handles that as an intermediary. But and that's so this reverse engineering,
Right.
if you will, happens probably mostly offshore, and then is included
Yep.
in domestically imported products that come from these offshore companies or tool manufacturers. So
Those are good assumptions. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. I'll go out and say it's more fact than it is assumption. But then someone's going to say, list your facts out, and then I'm going to go, well, you pay for my attorney, and I'll be, I'll be happy to. Or if anybody ever wants to give me a call, you know how to reach me. Anyway, the bottom line is now, when we see somebody pop up on social media and go, I have 12 tablets I can sell somebody, and they're $700 a piece, and that's all you need to do for recalibration. And it's one time, you never have to pay me again. And just go buy your targeting system somewhere. Or I'm a distributor.
Yeah.
Everybody uses that term now. Everybody's a distributor. So
sure.
Yeah, because auto glass wasn't enough, but now we also have to become a distributor. So good. I mean, and there are actually some really good companies out there acting as distributors, because their techs use the tools, they use the tools, so they can tell other companies, this is an effective cutout tool, this is an effective whatever. So, but when it comes to recalibration, this new gold rush, I just always envision this like we're back in the 1800s, and somebody said, we found gold.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, back east, people are selling you wagons at 3 times the cost, but they're re-engineered wagons from a heap pile of old wood that's termite eaten. You get halfway, you're buying another one, and then as you get along, somebody's like, you need gold pans like this, and they're square. And they're not going to, you get out there and go, oh, you bought the square ones? No, that's not how we do it. So this whole thing about tools is, your company or your solution has this efficacy to say, we certify it, we go through it, and at the end of the day, you're going to make sure they get it calibrated,
right,
and the best possible outcome.
So let me
not
address.
Not perfect, right?
Right. So let me address that, because I think, when you're proud of your product, you want to be able to say, well, our product is better because of X, Y, and Z, right? Okay. We produce a better result, or it's more accurate, or it's more consistent, or it's this, or it's that, right? And so you want to be able to make those statements. Here's what I'll say about Augie. Augie is a better product in the marketplace, not because when everything goes correctly, it produces a better calibration, but because it's harder to produce an incorrect calibration. So let me explain what I mean by that. We're taking out some of the room for human error, right? So full size, you got to get the vehicle in the correct conditions, right? The environmental conditions, you got to take all that into account. You got to measure the distance out from the vehicle correctly and the height up correctly. And even if it's just something as simple as you give you and I both the same tape measure and the same setup to do. And how we interpret that tape measure, whether we're lining it up on the center of the black line at the correct position, or the inside or the outside of the black line. It's a difference that I can guarantee you will produce a difference in the yaw, pitch, and roll values. It'll be very minor, but it's a difference. And those differences stack, right?
Yeah.
So as we go through and we use the tape measure a little bit differently over and over and over again, we're producing a different result. It may not be enough to cause a failure. It probably won't be. If we're using the right black line on the tape measure, it won't be enough to cause a failure, because we're not going to be 13.5 inches off, okay? But it's enough to produce a difference. Those differences matter, right? We want to produce the best result. So when you're using an Augie, it's just math, right? There's no trick here. It's taking into account the position of the camera that it's finding with machine vision. It's taking into account all the measurements that we've put into the database based on the OEM procedure, right? About how that target is meant to be positioned in relationship to that vehicle and that camera. And it's displaying a digital image, a digital target that is the correct perspective. It's taking into account, is the camera offset, or is it on the center line of the vehicle? So in other words, is it looking from an angle at the target that's out in front on the center line, or is it looking straight ahead at the target? It's taking into account whether the height of the target and the camera are even. Is it looking straight ahead? Is it looking up at it? Is it looking down at it? It's taking into account all of those factors. It's doing math, and it's displaying a target in the correct perspective at the correct scale. That, again, now there's one vehicle that I'm aware of that will actually give you an image back when you complete the calibration if there's certain problems. Okay?
Okay.
There's one vehicle, one year make model that does it. Now there may be others, but we've only found one, and we've done a lot of looking. Okay? What we did is we actually made an incorrect target for that vehicle, both at full size and in the Augie environment. Okay? So we made an incorrect target that we could place, and we'd place it correctly, but it was incorrect enough that it would fail. Okay, so you following me so far?
Totally, yeah.
So now we go through and we do a full size calibration, we get the image back. We do an Augie calibration, we get the image back. We've placed the targets correctly in both scenarios. It failed in both scenarios because it's not the right target. Let's just say, for sake of conversation, we turn the target upside down.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Dimensions are the same, it's just the wrong orientation, so it fails. We compare those images. They're identical. We're doing what we say we do. We're producing the same perspective, the same scale, the same efficacy of all of that. So we had some testing done. We go to a third-party proving ground facility up in Michigan, Fowlerville. We said, okay, there's these existing standards from NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, on how ADAS features are meant to perform. And similarly, there's standards from IIHS, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, for how ADAS features are supposed to perform. In both cases, we took a vehicle that we recalibrated with the Augie, and then we handed them the vehicle and the keys, and we said, we want you to test it against these standards. In both situations, we passed on all tests. The NHTSA, it's just simply pass-fail. With IIHS, there's actually a rating system, and you can get, I forget what the other ratings are, but the best rating is superior. And we got a superior rating on all criteria, on specific features that are either dependent entirely or heavily on the forward-facing camera. In other words, we weren't testing features that relied only on radar. We were testing features that relied heavily or entirely on the forward-facing camera.
Okay.
And we got a superior rating, including on the nighttime auto emergency braking, which is one of the hardest tests to pass for IIHS. That one, very few cars actually have a superior rating. We picked a car that already had the superior rating, and we were able to achieve that again with the Augie.
And to your, you just brought up night, and this is a question somebody had asked is, there are no requirements for a dynamic calibration to be done at night, correct, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, that's correct.
But these forward-facing camera scenarios can be affected by darkness.
Sure.
Yeah. So we're dynamically calibrating during probably daylight or not to the extent of full darkness. So it's just an interesting point. Is it comes back to, because a lot of shops will say, or just even people outside of it. So consumers will go, all right, I have to pay for my windshield to be replaced, but you're saying I have to pay for recalibration? No, don't worry about it. Just put the camera back in.
Yeah.
And oh no, it's a safety thing and whatnot. But we hear time and time again, and I would like to see a test where we take two identical vehicles. One, the windshield's replaced, the camera and everything's put back in, and then the other one is same thing, but we recalibrate it and then effectively drive that same vehicle and see how horribly it is off. You know.
Yeah. There's variables that factor into that. Okay? Let's assume two scenarios. One scenario is you get your replacement glass and it is identical in all characteristics to the glass that just came out, right? It came from the same lot, right? It came out of the same mold. It was produced by the same company. It was the same batch of silica.
No offset on the shade banding, so it's not encroaching by a millimeter. It's
identical in every measurable way, including the bracket placement. Now, in that situation, would we anticipate that, and we place it in the vehicle in the exact same position? I mean, there's not a tremendous amount of room that you can offset the glass left and right. We're talking a millimeter, maybe two, that you could be off. But let's everything's identical, okay?
Yep.
Would you expect that the camera that you removed from the old bracket and glass and reinstalled in the new bracket and glass, and it fits the same, the bracket's the same, everything's the same, would you expect it to perform differently if you didn't recalibrate it?
And so common sense, would be, it should absolutely.
It should perform the same.
But we don't know what the components inside of the camera housing are. So are the CMOS cameras in an environment that, as you've jostled it around, or it dropped and dangled, that it shook or vibrated in its rubber housing or its piezoelectric housing or whatever. But then when you put it back up, it's like, oh, I'm reoriented. Every now and then you have to take your phone and do the figure 8 to reacquire the GPS and compass setting.
Right.
But we don't know what happens in the camera, and you can't get an OE to say, well, our cameras
They're
are
pretty
this.
tight-lipped about it.
And you mentioned the camera housing and the bracket, and you can have that same lot, same one, and somebody will hold it up and go, anybody notice that camera bracket is off to the left by just barely a little bit?
Yeah.
And that's a glass manufacturer issue, whether it's OE or aftermarket, and even OE glass fails. Even there's bad OE glass that's done. But it really is. I know there's been tests done by certain shops and individuals where they said, look, we took the vehicle, we didn't calibrate it, we drove it, and this was our experience. Look at this. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then they're like, look, we took that same vehicle, and the only thing is, we just calibrated it, and look at the difference. Well, all right, now it's the same vehicle. You had the expectation of it,
right?
And now if you had a completely different one, and did it fail? I don't know if that's the case. Did it really fail,
right?
Or was it just it was like 94%, and then now when you recalibrated it, it's pass 100%.
Right.
So you're like, okay, well there's 6%, but 94 is still pass.
Yeah.
And you just noticed there was like maybe a 3-second hesitation, and the SEMA Garage just came out with their aftermarket, calibrate, and that's very interesting when you peel that orange back, or actually not orange, it would be onion, because holy shit, like it's just the thing, like now all of a sudden you add a 6-inch lift to a Ford truck,
right,
and it's just a little marginal braking issue now. If calibration wise, you didn't recalibrate, you threw the vehicle back out on the line. Here you go.
Right.
Now this starts to get people wondering. Well, where is this at?
And the OEs, I believe, for some time to come, are going to remain pretty tight-lipped about it. And it's not because
lawyers and liability.
Well, lawyers and liability, but it's also just bandwidth, right? They don't have an army of people sitting around saying, hey, what possible ways is Bobby going to modify my vehicle after it hits the street? And how do I verify what will or won't work? So I think the work that Mike and the SEMA Garage are doing is really interesting, because what it's showing is you take a vehicle that was factory calibrated, right? It was calibrated on the assembly line as it was being produced, and now you've made some modifications to it. And what is that actually doing? And it's kind of proving out the logic, right? Logic would tell you raise the vehicle up 6 inches and you change nothing else. Lane keep assist and features like that should still work in a pretty similar fashion. Auto emergency braking is going to be looking a little further down the road because you've got a little taller perspective. Those things by themselves I don't think are detrimental. Right? And so, as long as you're not, going with the Carolina squat approach. Are you familiar with that?
No, but it's
okay.
I'm not sure. We should put a disclaimer, not for people under 21. Or
well, yeah, right. So Carolina squat is a very popular modification to pickup trucks. It started in Carolinas. Okay. It's made its way down to us in Florida.
Okay. Wow.
And what the modification is, you raise the front end and you lower the back end.
I see no advantage to this.
Oh, no, there is none.
Oh, to get your moonshine in, maybe.
Maybe.
And for those that make moonshine.
I don't know. I'm not going to hazard any guesses. Personally, Oh, and generally they're also going with like straight pipes on the exhaust, regardless of what engine might be in it, right? So it might be a 6-cylinder, but it's now a 6-cylinder with straight pipes, so no mufflers, no catalytic converter, and it's just.
This seems like a very pleasurable vehicle to drive around in.
Yeah.
And then you're going to still rely on lane keep assist?
I'm not exaggerating when I say the attitude of the vehicle, front end, back end, is about like this, driving down the road.
Well,
right? To me, you ever seen the dog that maybe you've threatened with the newspaper and they tuck their tail kind of under their butt, and they tuck their butt down a little bit because they're trying to run away from you because they don't want their butt to get smacked, right? That's what it looks like. It looks like the scalded dog, right?
That's so weird.
It's not a look I like. I'm trying to remain open-minded about it because No,
I'm shutting the door on that. If you're a hobbyist with that, you're not going to care about your car needing any of those features.
My reason for trying to remain open-minded is a little different, right? I'm in this industry, in the automotive industry, nearly 30 years, and for 30 years we've been talking about how we've got a technician shortage and an enthusiast shortage and whatever. Well, they're taking an interest. These are younger people, and they're taking an interest, and they're making modifications to their vehicle. It's not modifications I would make. But at least they're taking an interest. And so maybe there's some value. They're paying somebody to do the work, or they're paying somebody to buy the parts, right? So there's some tangible benefit to the industry.
Sure.
But from a calibration standpoint, no, I'm completely, it's way out. Yeah. I mean, the headlights are pointing at the overpass when they drive on.
Well, that's so you can see the zombies throwing bricks.
You're right. Or the UFO.
Yeah, you want a good, because finally we might get a good clean picture, that coupled with Samsung night vision or something. iPro 15 phone going, oh look,
right. Fortunately, it's mostly domestic trucks, and it's mostly a little bit older.
Well, and while we're on, so I know I have had this conversation more than once in the Auto Glass Safety Council's committees, so everybody jumps right out and says, yeah, until your family's in the car and you care. And I'm like, well, okay, Doug, arbitrary name. So Doug, so you have your family in the car and you just got your glass replaced, and you turn on lane keep assist, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel right. Doug, are you going to keep lane keep assist on, or are you going to turn it off?
Right.
Well, I'm going to turn it off. Okay, so when you do, any imminent danger to your family? No.
Right.
Okay, so not recalibrating it didn't kill you. Well, when I first turned it on, I noticed, I'm like, are you in control of the vehicle, Doug?
Yeah.
Because that's the edict of, humanity. Are you in control of the vehicle that you're riding? No matter what it is. When you take your hands off as a kid, or maybe as an adult, from your bike handlebars, and all of a sudden just decides to turn the other way and you flip over and dislocate your shoulder and everything. Is it the bike manufacturer who's at fault for not, allowing that nut to perfectly go back on, and there was a wobble? Or it leads down a rabbit hole that these are not, they are safety systems that are passive, in the sense that you, as the driver in command of the vehicle, can disable and enable.
Right.
And right
and
away.
And override when they're active.
Absolutely. Well, this morning, self-driving car here.
Okay.
I had to intervene. There's an area that it was like, I don't know, like what the hell, like we should be over here. And I'm like, oh, no, we're not in England. No, I had to take control of the vehicle.
Right.
Now, it's the same thing here. You're going to get your car back. You go to do something. It's not like it's going to show itself 25 miles into your drive. It's going to be an immediate display of it's not working.
Right. And just building on that, right? So it's in the name. It's a driver assistance system, okay?
Lane keep assist.
Right? It's meant to be there as kind of a backup, as a safety net, as it's not meant to be something that you're relying on. Analog brakes, right? Let's rewind the clock a bit. Analog brakes aren't there so that you can wait to the last possible minute and just mash the pedal to the floor and let it take over, right? Analog brakes are there so that if you were distracted or something's happened or someone else has done something completely erratic, you can mash the brakes, right? Pedal all the way to the floor and let it not lock up while it's doing everything it can to stop the vehicle effectively.
Right.
It's an assistance system.
Well, and the same thing with emergency braking. Again, if you follow the 4-second rule or 8-second rule in the bumper, and you're counting between targets, and you're like, okay, I'm at a 2-car length or 3-car length at this speed.
Right.
It's not the vehicle's emergency braking to go, you know what, if I just drift this guy by about 3 feet, the emergency braking system is going to go perfect. I got you covered.
Right.
That's on you. And if it's faulty, it's a safety assistance.
Sure.
And it's not meant to be fully engaged. Now, if they advertise this is something that will save your life every time, then that changes.
That might be different.
This changes it, absolutely.
Yeah, and I know we don't spend a lot of time reading owner's manuals, but spoiler alert, the owner's manual does not say that. The owner's manual says this system is meant to intervene.
Absolutely.
And hopefully reduce.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not quoting directly, but the idea here is it's going to intervene, it's going to reduce the severity of whatever event might have taken place, but it's not going to prevent it. Even when you go and you do the testing at some of these facilities, it's not that auto emergency braking should mean you never contact the slower moving or stationary vehicle or whatever in front of you.
Right.
It's meant to say that the system alerted first at a particular point in time, and that it then activated at a particular point in time or distance before an impending collision.
Sure.
It's about intervention.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know, so Auto Glass Safety Council, so we're going to hone in on safety. So I am absolutely a 100% proponent, so is the organization, in saying, okay, we're here as an industry to say, we want you to perform everything to put that vehicle back in a condition that is as safe as it can be in an aftermarket sense, because we're never going to do factory.
Right.
But okay, so we're saying that, but at the same time, I'm going to lean in on a side, because the Auto Glass Safety Council and even some of the things that we've published say that if you're going to release the vehicle back to the customer or release it to them for them to go to a dealership, here's how you let them know, and some procedures. So I see so many people online going, if you're not going to calibrate the car, don't take the job. Or if the customer refuses, don't take the job.
Sure.
So the thing is, somebody's going to do the job. Mm-hmm. And are we really, as an industry, looking bad if I am a company who's been in the business for 30 years providing auto glass safe, all my customers are happy. I now tell that customer, look, we don't do the calibration, but the dealership does. So when we're done here, we're gonna do this, or even better, hey, would you like to coordinate it to where we just take your car to the dealership?
Right.
We'll go perform the service there, and then they can do it. So there's always these creative ways. But if you do let the customer go with the vehicle, they have been notified. And I know I hear people right now, there's no document that'll ever stand up to the liability that you have by releasing the car to the, and I'm like, well, even when you do a windshield replacement and you have your little terms and conditions at the bottom, I challenge that would stand up just as ill as your disclaimer to let that car ride without it. And I know we tackle it all the time. So it's this whole thing is, one, you hear that there's this massive 27-inch leeway. So no calibration is ever perfect. You and I would like it to be 0.0, from a pure math function.
Sure.
And then you have these shops that can't do it. So there's something in between, and it seems like there's so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt and fodder in the industry at the same time.
Right.
That all of these things don't get properly addressed, to where I don't believe right now, even for forward-facing recalibration, that we don't have all the answers to make a sound enough opinion about releasing vehicles that haven't been calibrated properly. I know in an interview I just had that I get what they were saying is that you want your vehicle in a controlled environment because you lessen the opportunity for mistakes to happen, which just means the recalibration takes longer. It's not that you can't get the same result externally. It's just that there might be external factors depending on the system you have that might impede the speed at which you can do it. So are you going to calibrate it in 30 minutes or if I was in a pristine location, it'd be 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you know what I'm saying? So where the Augie fits in is it wouldn't matter if it was in that pristine white building,
Right.
if it was out here in the cul-de-sac,
Sure.
and your technicians that are remote have that capability to work the troubleshooting checklist, if you will,
Yeah.
if an issue does arrive,
Absolutely.
which is huge. It's time saving.
And the way we try to refer to it is when you've got the Augie mounted to the vehicle on the glass.
Not the hood.
Not the hood.
Your glass is not the hood.
Right. There's a difference.
Yes,
Those are two
big
different
difference,
components.
guys. Yeah.
When you've got it there, the Augie is on plane with the vehicle. Okay? So you're no longer worried about the plane that the vehicle is sitting on, right? So we can do an Augie calibration on a loading ramp. We can do it with one tire up on the curb. We can, technically, and I've made this joke, I don't think we'll ever actually try it, unless you want to volunteer one of your vehicles, but we've made this joke about how if I could mount the Augie to the windshield with the vehicle sitting on the roof, I could do the calibration. Because from the perspective of the camera, it's seeing a correctly placed target at the right distance, the right height, the right scale, the right perspective, right? So all those other factors go out of the window. What's the fuel level, right? How many people? Okay, let's just hone in on that.
Going with this.
Let's hone in on that for just a moment, because we're talking a lot about Facebook experts, okay?
Yeah.
In the glass industry.
Yeah.
And I just saw a post days ago, right, from one of these Facebook experts. Name will be anonymous.
Well, we'll find you and we'll put the post below.
Okay, fair enough. You can do that.
I will.
Okay? And
I'm that guy.
And this Facebook expert said, listen, I've done tons of glass replacements on vehicles with forward-facing cameras, and I have proven time and time again that as long as you leave the key off, you can disconnect the camera, reconnect the camera, put it all back together, go in and check, and there are no faults, there are no TTCs, there are no lights on. It's fine. You don't need to calibrate anything. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? If everything was perfect, maybe you're right. But everything's not perfect, right? You've used urethane to set the glass. You've had someone install the bracket on the glass. That glass was made out of materials. It's not going to be identical. Something's going to be different.
Yep.
And the reason the OEM has taken the position that it needs to be calibrated is because something's going to be different. Even something as simple as the camera itself, right? It's got a focal point. When you've moved it around and you've put it back into the bracket, like you said before, maybe something about the position of the internal mechanisms inside this module has changed. It needs to be calibrated.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, the Facebook experts take this position and they're sure of themselves about what has to happen. But when you go through and you do a calibration, I don't generally like to get all hyped up on the liability component. I think I tend to agree with the statement that says it doesn't matter what kind of release or whatever, you're probably going to find yourself in harm's way if or when it becomes an issue with that vehicle. I think that's probably right? The right attorney can make an issue out of whatever they want.
Garage keeper's policy will be on that bad side, but I
agree. I agree.
I mean, yeah.
And so, but it's gonna be a problem, okay? But at the same time, you do everything right, regardless of the system or whatever. You do everything right, and that vehicle leaves, and there's an incident, and then there's a question about what you did or didn't do, and you've got all your documentation, etc. I also believe it's going to be very difficult to actually prove what happened to that vehicle the moment it left your shop, right? Does the owner of the vehicle have their own scan tool and they went in just sniffing around and looked and they accidentally put it into a calibration operation, but they weren't able to execute, and maybe somehow they cleared out the calibration settings, right? I'm just talking hypothetically, okay? And And now that's the reason that there was a problem. But can you prove that? Is the black box, right? Is the black box going to find that
Depends on the OE. Was it recorded? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So there's so many variables.
And what is the black box standard?
Yeah, exactly.
None.
There isn't
Zero.
one.
Yeah.
And so going back to this notion of the fuel tank, okay, and the fuel level, I believe. I'm not one to speak in absolute, so I'm going to say the majority of the OEM procedures specify a fuel level, because fuel has a weight, and it affects the attitude of the vehicle. I don't mean the emotional attitude of the vehicle. I mean the physical attitude of the vehicle, okay, which is going to have an effect on the yaw, pitch, and roll values, okay, especially if you're doing a full-size calibration. Not when you're doing an Augie calibration, because it doesn't matter. The fuel level won't have an impact on that. The payload and the trunk won't matter. But for a full-size calibration or a conventional calibration, it matters. It has an effect. I don't believe that there are many, maybe not any, glass repairers that are out there adjusting fuel level before they do a calibration.
Nope. No, and it's interesting you bring that up. Bob Schraga, who used to own All Star Glass, which is now a Driven Brands company. So Bob had brought up many times, he even put a challenge to the room. How many of you in this committee, by a raise of hands, go and fill the gas tank up with the required amount of per OE?
I'm sure it was just a sea of hands, right?
No, it was Bob's hand. And Bob also said, how many of you in this room, for the dynamic drive, send 2 technicians out on the dynamic drive? And same thing, just Bob's hand.
Right.
And so people are like, well, geez, Bob, we don't get reimbursed to fill the gas back up. So customer always seems to come in with their car like just on vapors. So now we have to bring it up to a quarter tank. And in California, it's $6 a gallon. So I just invested $30 in this to do this, that I'm not getting back from the insurance company.
Oh, I'm sure the customer is going to reimburse them every single time.
Yeah, right. But so these shops now start making, so it's ironic, and it blows my mind. In one sentence, you're going, I'm not going to follow the OEM procedures for this because I'm not getting reimbursed for it. But they're also then on the other side of the table going, we demand that you can't release the car to the customer unless you decide to do this. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're skipping a maybe pretty big deal, but maybe not. Because I've also had that conversation with an OEM. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, I'm going to put my engineering hat on, guys. So you engineer this car, and you're looking for perfect balance in the vehicle, no matter what weight distribution is. So it's just like finding the CG if you're a pilot in an aircraft. You always need to know what your weight limit is for center of gravity. It affects takeoff, landing. It's a whole thing. So, and mind you, that's all mostly computerized now for modern planes. But still, you're in a vehicle, I'm like, so you didn't place the gas tank all the way at the back, expecting, what do you call it, Carolina drop or whatever?
Yeah.
So that when I first put all the gas in, it somehow magically like levels the car, or are you telling me that the car is going up when it's full? And they're like, oh, no, but we perfectly balanced vehicle. And I'm like, okay, so why do you then say the vehicle should have this much gas in it? And they're like, it's not for the at standing still weight. It's more so that as the vehicle travels with gravity, if the gas shifts, like if you emergency brake and now everything goes to the front, the vehicle is going down. But then I'm like, well, in a braking scenario, depending on the braking style and model, and do you have real-time air shocks or car stability? What's going on? You could, and then you let off and it comes back up. Where's the camera looking in relation to plane? And they said the safety system already engaged and disengaged itself because the threat has been taken care of. And I found that to be a very interesting conversation, because they're saying in one breath, the car's perfectly balanced whether there's 4 quarts of oil or 2 quarts of oil, whether there's a half a tank of gas, so 8 gallons or 16 gallons.
Right.
The efficiency then I brought up of PHEVs. So you got an engine, you got the engine, which is normally in the front, and you got the battery in the center, and you got the rear electric motor in the back. So now you're saying, as you have drained 6 gallons of gas from the front, now again, it's going to go this way or this way? Like, come on, like what? And they're like, it's a lot of it's carryover, and it's cover our ass.
I just thought of a really great question for the Facebook experts.
Okay.
I think we should throw a challenge out there to figure out whether or not it makes a difference if the hybrid battery is full or empty. I think we should do some extensive testing on that.
Okay, so now everybody has to wake up to what's the electron weight.
Yeah. I mean,
we're totally geeking out now. Like,
yeah,
I know, absolutely. Well, and it's at the same time, it's like, so are you supposed to start asking, is this a family car? Great. So what's the, like when you do helicopter trips, they're always like, before the tour, how much do you weigh? Yeah. And everybody goes, today? And they all put their ideal weight. And you show up there. And
in my mind or on the scale?
Like, shit, like, yeah. No, and there's all these variables, and that's what does make this tough and confusing. The bottom line is, yes, if you can perform the recalibration services, do.
Right.
Select a tool and a support system that works for your company.
Sure.
That A, provides your customer the best service and safety possible, but B, realizing that this isn't a cash grab. It's an investment in your business for the future. There haven't been many times in the automotive glass industry where something like this has come up and has challenged the technical knowledge that now is required to do this.
Right.
Thank you for tuning in to part 1 of Snow Globe or Crystal Ball, What Lies Ahead for ADAS Calibration, with guest host Josh McFarlin, President and COO of AirPro Diagnostics, recorded live from the Collision Industry Conference Winter's Meeting in Palm Springs, California. Thank you for listening to Shatterproof, the Auto Glass Journey for Independence podcast, brought to you by the Independent Glass Association and me, Gary Hart, your host. If you haven't already liked this podcast or haven't subscribed, like this episode and hit that subscribe button so anytime we update the content, you'll be the first to get access to all of this great media and industry information. We also want to thank the sponsors of this podcast, Edirect Glass, who's also the maker of Glass Part Match, which is free to the industry, so get your account today at www.iga.org/GPM, and Augie by AirPro, that amazing on-the-glass targeting recalibration system, allowing you to work from anywhere at any time, and along with the support you need to succeed. You can find all the links referenced in this podcast in the descriptions or comments below. Again, thank you for tuning in and supporting the IGA so we can continue to provide quality information and educational materials for the independent automotive glass industry.